Welcome to the JMJ Commercial Realty Podcast. Dive into market insights, winning strategies, and the stories shaping today's commercial real estate landscape. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome everyone to the JMJ Commercial Realty Podcast. My name is Adam Schertzer. I'm an advisor and salesperson at JMJ Commercial Realty, and I'm joined as always by Josh Cedia, the broker and owner of JMJ Commercial Realty. How you doing, Josh?
Doing well. Good morning, Adam.
Yeah. And we have a special guest today. Would you like to introduce him?
Sure. We have Steve Moskowitz joining us today. And an honor to have an esteemed colleague in the world of commercial real estate joining us.
Great. Well, I appreciate you being here, Steve, all the way from Maryland. Is that right?
Yeah, Bethesda, Maryland, and I'm happy to be here, and it's my pleasure.
Awesome. So just to give a little background, how did you guys meet? I know Josh and Steve, you guys go back a little bit, right?
Yeah, I met Josh several years ago before I moved here, and I think we were trying to do a deal in Framingham, and unfortunately, that's one of the ones that didn't work out, but we struck up a nice connection, and I guess we both moved on a little bit. And we've developed a working relationship. I moved to Maryland about 2.5 years ago, and we're trying to do a number of deals together. So that I started working for the city of Newton, and it actually turned out to be a good way to make connections with people. And I lost my position due to Proposition 2.5 going back in the 70s. So I'm dating myself a little bit, but I made some good connections, and I got hired as a property manager with little or no experience. And I think property management's a good way to get started in the real estate business. You learn a lot. You learn about the buildings, a little bit about the mechanicals. And through that effort, I came in contact with a number of brokers. The company that I work for owns some property, and I started working. I always had my license, but didn't do any brokerage. But it was a good background, and I learned a lot. And as things moved on, I saw that the brokerage business was pretty active, and people were making good money. And if you worked hard, you could make a good living and kind of set your own hours, which was nice too. So I joined a brokerage firm. It was called H. Lotman and Company in Brookline. And this was probably in the early 80s. And of course, the first year, as you know, Adam, it's a struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And I made it through the first year, not earning a whole lot of money. But all of a sudden, the second year, things really took off. And I was benefited by the tax law changes in the mid 80s. There were people buying property for very significant tax deductions. And of course, as a new broker, the timing was good. And I started selling property, and one thing led to another. And I did well. I became the vice president of the firm. And then I was there about 3 or 4 years. And I decided at that point, I started my own company. I specialized in investment sales in the West Suburban area. And those were boom years in the mid 80s. I'd say 80, 84 through 87 or 88. And like many brokers, I thought it was pretty easy. But the business kind of goes in cycles. And sure enough, the late 80s, the interest rates went up into the high teens, and I think it actually hit 20% at one time.
Wow.
So it was very difficult, and a lot of owners and developers started losing properties. But I hung in there, and things turned around. I had my own firm for probably 8 years, and at one point I decided I needed to get a little more involved with a bigger firm. So I joined Ardui Homes Realty, which is had been based in Natick, Mass.
Mhm.
I believe they're now in Wayland. And I worked there for a number of years, became a vice president there, did pretty well. And the firm was concentrated in the far western suburbs, I would say, Natick to Worcester. And my concentration had been in the inner suburbs along 128. So that I was the only one working that territory at the time. And I ended up joining Heritage Corporation, which is based in Newton. And I worked there as a broker, and I was there a little over 20 years. And sold a lot of property for the company, and also did third-party brokerage. And again, concentrating from the Alston Brighton area out to 128, up and down 128, I would say, from Woburn to Braintree. And my wife had wanted to move to Maryland to be closer to my daughter and grandchildren. And we talked about it for several years, and she finally pushed me to make a change. And I got my licenses in what's called the DMV here, which is the district, and Maryland, Virginia. And we finally made the move in October of 23. And again, the first year was quite a struggle. I came to Maryland not knowing anyone really, which makes it even harder to do. But I got pretty aggressive with cold calling, which I hadn't done in a number of years because I used to be getting a lot of referrals, which develops the longer you're in business. So I fought my way through the first year here, and things are going much better. I'm just starting my third year here, and made some good connections, starting to get referrals. And of course, the weather's a lot better here, which makes it nice.
Yep.
So that I'm concentrating here on tenant representation. It's interesting, a lot of the property here is owned by the large real estate investment trusts. And it's a booming market I'm in Montgomery County, which goes from Bethesda up Interstate 270 to about Clarksburg. And a very dynamic area, being very close to DC. People are making good salaries here. The income level is very good. It's a very democratically diverse community. And it's been going well. I have some good representation with starting to get medium-sized companies. And I look forward to a very good year.
That's awesome. That sounds great. I love hearing the history and what you've gone through with real estate. One thing that kind of stands out for me that I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, me myself, is how did you get through those down years? When I know you said the up years, it's great, and I think a lot of people in real estate, especially if they start out and and everything's booming, everything's great, and then interest rates go up, or there's a recession or things like that. What do you do during those periods to keep going?
It was quite hard financially, but I knew it was going to work out. I just had that that feeling that things would work out. I've talked to at the time I talked to some experienced brokers, and they told me that to hang in there, basically, that things will turn around. I had to use some of my personal savings in when I first got started, and a little bit when I got here. But with hard work and perseverance, it turned around. And I think some of the qualities that are important for brokers, persistence is very important, and your reputation is very important. You really don't have a lot to go on other than your reputation. And if you treat people well, they respect you, and they'll make referrals. Another good quality, I think, is of a broker is a good listener. You have to really understand the needs of your clients. It's good to know what they're really looking for. And if you ask some key questions, you can usually get that information. It doesn't always come quickly or easily, but it helps to be a good listener and to ask key questions. A couple of other important characteristics, I think, is to make connections with people in the community. The Chamber of Commerce, as you both know, is a good resource. You get to meet people, and there are a lot of business people that are there, and they have different needs over time. I also joined the Rotary Club here, which is a philanthropic service organization. And besides the service, there are people in there that have businesses, and you get some leads that way. And it's also good to make contact with the architects and bankers, insurance people, lawyers, and they all are potential sources of business. So that's what I've pretty much tried to do. I've gone back to cold calling, which is hard work, but it pays off. As I said, I certainly did that when I started in the business, and didn't really have to do that for many years. But when I got here, I realized that that's the way I'm going to meet people. And I knocked on a lot of doors and used up some shoe leather walking around, and it's kind of all paid off.
That's great. Yeah, no, that's all great advice. We did a whole episode on the networking part and just the meeting people. Yeah, I can't agree more with that, and getting involved in your community. That's been huge for me, and helped me, I think, get to where I am in such a short amount of time. That makes a lot of sense there. Now, I'm curious too, Steve, since you've been doing this for a while, and you started out when, before the age of the internet and cell phones and all that stuff, how was it different, back then to now? And is it better now because all the technology? Is it harder, different ways, or kind of, if you could just talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Actually, I think it's quite a bit easier.
Okay.
You had to run around a lot more with offers. This is before fax machines, and certainly before the internet and computers. And if you had an offer, you had to hand deliver it a lot of times. Here, you just send it over the internet, and it's certainly a lot easier. So that I think it's made life a lot easier for the brokerage business. And it's certainly been beneficial to me. But it's a big change from the way things used to work. I mean, years ago, people used to get a lot of leads from the Boston Globe. Every Sunday, brokers would run to get the Sunday edition, and people were advertising for property for sale, property for lease, and that's how you got a lot of leads. And, you'd be making calls Sunday morning. And you don't find any ads in the newspapers now. It's all over the internet. And so that's a big change. So it's quite different. And I think in the long run, it's much better. It's easier. And I think you can do more business this way.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm glad we have this. I don't know if I could have done it before the age of the internet and all of that. Um, so I'm definitely appreciative for all the tools we have and what we have available to us today.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. I was gonna say, Steve, do you have any stories or anything that kind of comes to mind that's over the years, anything that you might be able to share, on that front?
Yeah, I have some interesting stories. I developed a good client that did business in central Massachusetts. Um, it came to me in an odd way through a broker who made contact with a gentleman, and he, for some reason, wasn't getting along with him. And I'm not sure why, other than I think it was a situation where he asked too many questions, and the client was somewhat secretive. And I guess he didn't want to disclose exactly what his business was. It turns out that he was had a connection with the gentleman who started a Digital Equipment Corporation.
Wow.
Which, as you probably know, was very active in the 70s and 80s.
Mhm.
And as it turned out, what he was doing is he would take the important minerals from old computers and take the gold and silver and other valuable pieces, and he would sell them in the open market. And the broker came to me and said, "Look, I'm really not getting along with this guy. I'd like to give it to you as a referral. And instead of you work with him and just pay me a referral fee." So of course I was glad to do that, obviously. And I made a good connection with this gentleman, and it turns out he needed to buy two buildings in central Massachusetts where he would extract the minerals from these computers. And I sold him a 156,000 mill building in Clinton, Mass, and then 186,000 mill building in Clinton, Massachusetts. And obviously, it was very rewarding numerically. But the interesting thing, he would take me to lunch every now and then, and he drove a chocolate brown Rolls Royce. So he was pretty well off. And we'd go to lunch one day, and he said, "Oh, I want you to help me take something into the building." So we pull up to the building one day, and he opens the trunk of his Rolls Royce, and it's filled with toilet paper. So he wanted to carry the toilet paper into his building. So here I was, a broker in a three-piece suit at the time. People used to wear those suits, carrying all these rolls of toilet paper into the building. But in the long run, I sold him two other buildings, and it was very rewarding financially. And unfortunately, he was a heavy smoker and passed away shortly after that. And I had a relationship with his sons, but it was never quite the same. So that was one instance where I think a broker asked too many questions, and I was the benefit of it. So no complaints with that.
That's great.
I'm sure I have some other stories. Harold Brown, that's a name that may predate your involvement, but I know Josh is probably familiar with that name.
Yes.
He was the largest property owner in the Boston area for many years. And one of my former roommates was a property manager there. And it took about a year, but slowly he got Harold's ear and got me in to see him. And we struck up a pretty nice friendship. Harold had quite a reputation, both good and bad, in the community. But I liked the guy. He was a very straightforward shooter. And this was interesting. The first time that I had a meeting set up to meet him, I was waiting in the conference room, and my associate Gary came out and said, "Well, Harold would like to meet you, but he wanted to go to the bathroom first. He thought he'd be more relaxed." So I thought that was interesting. So we had a nice meeting, and things progressed, and I ended up selling him a nice retail building in Peabody, one of the, I think it was called Pier 1 Imports, along Route 114 in Peabody. And I also sold him a small building on Needham Street in Newton. So that was a good relationship.
Great. All right. So that sounds great, Steve. Have any other stories you can share with us about your years in real estate?
Well, I'd like to go back to the one we started if we can. And I think I started to tell you it was at the Brighton Marine Health Center, which used to be the U.S. Public Health Hospital, which they closed in the 80s, I guess. And a group of military people, with the help of Tip O'Neill, started the Brighton Marine Health Center. And their goal was to provide free health care to retired and active duty military personnel. And they had some extra space there. It's a large facility, and they wanted to rent office space. So they hired me through a referral, and I placed a number of people. It had to be related medical. There were a number of therapists and small medical folks. And then I got a call from a Harvard-trained psychologist. Actually, he was a psychiatrist, and he had been at Harvard for 25 years. And they were redeveloping the building, and he was losing his space, and he heard about Brighton Marine. So he was an older gentleman, and he came to visit me in Newton, and he came on his bicycle. He lived in Wellesley, and he had driven by Brighton Marine, and he liked it, and he was interested in a long-term lease. So I said, okay, how about 3 years? And he said, oh, no, I want 7. 7, I said. And then he went on to say that he was turning 80, but still wanted a 7-year lease. So I said, okay. I talked to the executive director, and we met him, and he seemed like a nice fellow. And we went ahead and prepared a lease, and he moved into the facility. And the facility is run by retired military people, so that it's quite different from the normal property management. They take care of things yesterday, not tomorrow. And he moved in, and they helped him move in. And a couple of days later, they hadn't heard from him, and so the head property manager thought he would visit him to say hello. And he walked over to his space, and he didn't hear any noise. And usually therapists have a sign that in session or whatever. So he had keys to all the spaces, but he tried the door, and it was open, and he slowly opened it. And this is the good part: the the psychiatrist was sitting at his desk with his legs up, and he was completely naked. So Arthur, the property manager, was obviously taken back, and he said, I'm sorry to disturb you." And the doctor says, "Well, Arthur, I'm just trying to get a good feel for the space." So Arthur said, "Thank you very much, and I'll be on my way." And that's pretty much the story. It's
Wow.
hard to top that. And it turns out that he was a good tenant, and he was there for a number of years. And I kind of lost track of it, but whether he served out his 7-year term, I honestly don't know. But that was one of the more interesting conversation I had with Arthur when he said, "You wouldn't believe what happened."
Yeah, that's crazy. And yeah, I was going to follow up by asking you, Steve, if he did last the 7 years there, but
Well, I honestly don't know. I was in touch with them for a number of years, and then the executive director retired, and they hired somebody new, and he had his own people, and I kind of lost my agreement with them, and so I don't know, but he still could be with us. Maybe he renewed for another 7. It's hard to know.
yeah.
But I was very surprised when I heard that story, and at any rate, that's probably the top one that I have.
Well,
I've got some other stories that I'll be glad to share. This was in 1985, before the tax laws changed, and it was very lucrative for investors to buy property in 85, and I remember the Registry of Deeds was open midnight New Year's Eve because people were still registering their property. So I had a client that was very aggressive, and I had sold him a few buildings, and we had a very nice relationship, and he trusted me a lot, and he was so aggressive that I used to find him property, and he would buy it without seeing it. I'd send him the information, and he'd say, "Oh, this looks good. Make up an offer, put it in, and I want to buy it." And I sold him 2 or 3 properties that way. So at that time, I was into the business about 2 years, and I thought, boy, this is going to be easy. And it turned out not quite so easy, but he lucked out, and he got some good properties. And that leads me to another story that he was involved in. He used to, besides buying from himself, he used to flip properties. And one time I sold him a property. It was along Highland Avenue in Needham, very close to 128. And it was a 2-story office building, and I sold it to him for $750,000. And he told me he was going to flip it, but he didn't tell me he was going to flip it on the same day that he closed on the property. So they showed up together, and the deal was struck at $750, and then in the next 5 minutes, he sold it for $1 million while the original seller was still there. And I was sitting there kind of with my head in my lap, because the original seller was not very happy.
yeah. Oh my God. I didn't even know that was possible to do something like that.
Yeah, that was the one time that happened, and I was glad there were no more of those, at least on the same day.
Wow. Yeah, you think you'd wait until maybe the next day or this afternoon. You wouldn't want
Yeah,
the seller
it
to
was
be there.
it was very awkward, to
Yeah.
say the least.
Wow.
But I imagine I was able to continue my relationship with the original seller, and I handled some of his leasing. In fact, he owned the building behind Bob Krause's building on off Newtonville Ave. I can't think of the name of the little street, but it runs right parallel to the turnpike. And guy by the name of Johnny Gallagher. And I handled his leasing for years, so that I guess he got over the annoyance of losing $250,000.
Wow.
So that was another good one. I'm trying to think. There's a gentleman that we need to talk about. Josh, maybe you've heard the name Sanioff.
Yes,
Do
I
you
have.
do you know that name?
I don't know it well, but I've heard that name.
Okay, well, they're Iraqi Jews, and it's a group of seven brothers that own a ton of property in Brookline and Brighton. And I think they also own a property right up the street on Washington Street from where we have our listing. So it may be worthwhile to speak to them at some point. But the interesting thing is they spoke very little English, and the one brother that I was dealing with spoke no English, and somehow I did a sale with him, not understanding a word he was saying. So
And that was probably before Google Translator that you could
yeah,
use your phone. So
exactly.
yeah.
But they own a lot of property, and it may be worth trying to negotiate the language barrier again.
Yeah, I went into I was just going to say that I showed a client a property recently. The agent wasn't able to make it, but she said, "Oh, just go inside. There's a business there, and they'll let you in." So we go inside, and the person working there didn't speak any English, and I think they, spoke Spanish or Portuguese, and my Spanish was very little. So we actually he pulled out our phone and used like the Google Translate, so we were able to talk, and then it translated, and he was able to talk back and forth, and then. But without that, I don't know if we would have been able to tour the property to get.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So it just comes to me another one that I hadn't thought of. I did a lot of business with in Woburn with the name escapes me for a minute. The gentleman from Medford that owns a lot of property in Woburn. Josh, I'm sure you've dealt with them.
Cummings you're talking about?
Cummings, I couldn't think of it.
Hmm.
So I did a number deal with Cummings. They were a pleasure to work with because they do everything. They have architects, engineers, and they maintain this space very nicely. So I had a space in Woburn. I can't remember. It was near their headquarters. And I had an Asian fellow that was interested in it. And, it was about 3,000 feet, combination of office, light industrial. And he said that he wanted to bring his team next week to see it. So that I said, oh, sure. And so we showed up at the property. I was there early, and they pulled up in two giant Mercedes-Benz limousines. And there were four people in each limousine. So there were a total of 8 Asians there. And they were all dressed in beautiful, three-piece suits, had big black briefcases. And we go up to the front of the property. And pretty much at the same time, they opened their briefcases and they each pulled out a sundial. And they were standing in front of the property, examining how the sun hit the front door. And they're walking around, gyrating these. They might have been a compass or a sundial. I'm not sure what it was. But they all had to agree that the sun hit the front door exactly right, because in Chinese, that's very good luck. And it turns out that it worked. It was, I wish I had a picture of it, because there were these 8 gentlemen, probably all close to the same age, in their 40s, standing there with nice suits on, manipulating these compasses, and we ended up leasing them the space. But it was quite interesting.
Yeah, that is really interesting. Just the
And
cultural differences there.
over the years, I noticed that not to that extent, but I had other clients who would bring a compass and, stand in front of the building a little bit and make sure the sun was right. And other times it wasn't. And,
Hmm.
luckily I got lucky once in a while and found the right angle of the sun, so to speak.
That's great.
Has anyone ever asked you that for your own listings when they call up and say, normally they talk about, oh, the square footage, the size, the price. Does anyone ever ask about the sun? You as
No,
well, Josh? Has that ever happened?
No.
yeah, it hasn't come up, and they kind of keep that to themselves for some reason.
Hmm.
I'm not sure why,
Yeah.
but I know it's happened a few times,
Wow.
and but that was interesting.
Hmm.
One other story that I think I have is I handled a small building in Stoughton. It was a Class C building that was a combination of retail and second floor office industrial. And at the time, I lived in Jamaica Plain in the high rise right on the Jamaica Way. And the owner of the property lived in the building as well. And we became friendly. And it really wasn't a quality property. So I wasn't anxious to handle it. But seeing he lived in the building and he knew me, and I did him a favor. So he had a small retail unit that was vacant, and he sent me down there to take a look at it. And so I go to the space, and the door was open. I walked in, and there was a gentleman sleeping in there. So I said, "What are you doing here?" So he said, "Well, I want to lease the space." So I said, "Well, how did you?" He said, "Oh, the door was open, and I came in, and I liked it." So I told him what the price was, and he said, okay. And so I go back to the owner, and I said, I showed the space today, and it turns out there was a gentleman there, and he was actually in the space, and it looked like he was living there. He said, "Oh, no, it's the same guy. I've thrown him out. I can't tell you how many times. I don't want to lease to him. He was not supposed to sleep in the building." And somehow he keeps coming back, and you'll have to find somebody else. So that deal didn't happen.
Oh yeah. I feel like you had something similar this past year, Josh, with one of the properties we had. I'm not going to name it, but
Yeah.
with
Occasionally
someone.
that happens. Yeah.
Yeah, you find someone, and then also, I know that the laws state that for commercial property you can't live there, but I find that sometimes people try to do that, and whether they make a little apartment in the back room or something like that to try to save money, but
It
something
it
that.
does tend to happen, and particularly with artists, I noticed a lot of them like to find a space where
Mhm.
there's a loft, and artists don't have much money,
Mhm.
and they like to find a place where they can kind of camp out and have their don't have to go far to work.
Yep.
And I think there's a number of spaces in Somerville. There's one in Alston that allow that, I think.
Yeah.
And I guess it works out pretty well if the zoning works. Why not take advantage of it?
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say that I feel like they should allow that more in certain situations just because of such the housing shortage that we have here in Massachusetts. Um,
Yeah, I think there's one in South Boston too that allows that,
mm,
so that it's become a little more popular over the years. And I've placed a few artists over the years, and they just don't make a whole lot of money, and they look for that kind of thing.
I mean, most
So
people,
that
most people work, I was going to say most people work from home, so why can't you live from work? You know?
Well, it may become more popular as the
Yeah.
housing shortage keeps getting worse in some ways. Although I'll tell you, around here, they're building condos like they're going out of style.
Mm,
And I keep wondering where all the people are going to come from because there's thousands and thousands of new units being developed. And I guess this area draws people from all over. It's interesting. You see license plates from all over the country
mhm.
here. States that you usually don't see in Massachusetts, Montana, Idaho.
Hmm.
Utah. And I think because of the, NIH and some of the other Walter Reed, some of the other medical facilities, they probably attract, people with training from all over the country.
Yeah.
You're talking about
Yeah.
the Maryland area, Steve?
What's that?
The Maryland area, you're saying?
Yeah, Maryland, Virginia, DC.
How far are you from DC, Steve? From where you guys are?
Well, as the crow flies, not very far, but because of the traffic, it takes a good 45 minutes to get there.
Okay.
But it's really, 7 or 8 miles away. But
Yeah.
it's just the traffic pattern here can be very difficult. And of course, it depends on the time of day, too.
Hmm.
You don't want to try and drive around between 7:30 and 9 o'clock. It's really busy. And
Yeah.
I've been told that it used to be worse when everybody was in the office. And, people have started to go back, but it's still not to the extent it was years ago before COVID.
Hmm.
But that's one of the drawbacks of the area. But otherwise, it's very dynamic. People make good salaries here, and the rents are high, and the weather's good, and so it's a big draw here.
Great. Any other stories that kind of come to mind that you want to share?
Well, I think that probably covers most of the interesting ones. The usual stories of give and take a little bit, and sometimes deals drag out, and sometimes they die, and sometimes they come back, and sometimes it can turn around in a year. You never know. So that I don't think I have any others, but I know that we need to talk about a couple of things that we're working on, and I have some new information probably by the end of the day for you, and I'll get back to you late in the day.
Great.
Awesome. Well, Steve, we appreciate you taking the time to join us on this, talk about your history, some advice. And if anyone has any questions about your work, or maybe someone's listening down in your area and wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Well, it'd be either by my phone, which is 617-818-7026, or my email, Stephen with a V at capitalinvestmentsingularllc.com.
Awesome. Well, that's great. And if anyone wants to reach out to Josh or myself, any questions about the podcast here, you can reach us at podcast@jmj-cre.com. And I think that about wraps us up. Any final words from you, Josh?
Oh, this is great, Steve. Thank you so much for joining us, and thanks for sharing your experiences over the years. We really appreciate it.
Well, it's a pleasure talking with you guys. And Adam, you seem like you might have done some work with the radio. You have a good voice and a good presentation. So I'm wondering in your background if you had some experience that I don't know about.
No radio experience. I am a musician, so I've had performance experience. So I think maybe that kind of plays into it a little bit. But yeah, I'm thinking if this real estate thing doesn't work out, I might go into radio.
Well, from what Josh tells me, it's going along pretty well. So that
Yeah.
I hope it continues.
Thanks. I appreciate it, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay.
All
Good
right,
to
till
talk to
next
you
time.
guys.
Bye, everyone.
Have a good day. Take care.
The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on the JMJ Commercial Realty podcast are those of the host and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policies or positions of JMJ Commercial Realty or its affiliates. The information provided in this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered financial, legal, or real estate advice. Listeners are encouraged to consult with qualified professionals regarding their specific real estate or business needs. JMJ Commercial Realty makes no representations or warranties as to the accuracy, completeness, or suitability of any information discussed. Reliance on any information provided in this podcast is done solely at your own risk. By listening, you agree that JMJ Commercial Realty and its representatives shall not be held liable for any losses or damages resulting from the use of information shared.